Hello and welcome to this episode of Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Ahuva Hershkop. Welcome to the show, Ahuva.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Let's start off with the usual question of what were the values and beliefs that you were raised with that contributed to you becoming who you have?
Oh my gosh, that's like such a loaded question. I mean, the funny thing is that my parents will always tell you, and my mom will tell you, that I would start a question like this with like, well, the day that I was born was a Friday, because that's how I tend
I was born on a Friday too.
You know what? That is a great question, because there are so many, really. I mean, I was raised Orthodox Jewish, so I have values that I was raised with at home. I have values that I was raised with in my community. And really a big one of them was always giving back. I say that one of the things that I value most about, the Orthodox Jewish community that I grew up in really is like, once someone has accomplished something, I've always seen people sort of turning around and being like, how can I help the next person, right? Like, how can I make it that much easier? And that's really been my view and my value in starting this business. By training, I'm a registered dietitian. I experienced a ton of burnout in building my nutrition practice and seeing women around me who were experiencing the same. So once I sort of overcame that, I was like, all right, now it's my turn to turn around and help them.
Yeah. That is true. That culturally, giving back and giving charity is woven into that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was a really big, important value that I was always raised with, both in my home and both culturally. And so, that's really where the minute that I was like, oh, I kind of figured this out, I was like, everyone now needs to figure it out. Like, I need to I need to stand on a mountaintop and spread the word.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Are you still Orthodox?
I am.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Because I only ask because I know a lot of people I've talked to have been and have left.
Yes. So I know lots of people who have been and have left. I know people who didn't grow up Orthodox and have sort of shifted over. I grew up Orthodox. I still am. So I guess, I'm always interested, truthfully, in sort of where people end up finding their comfort, where people end up finding what works for them. Because I think, like anything else, there's a million different ways to practice in a way that feels fulfilling to you.
Yes, we talk about that all the time, but more in terms of meditation.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about it.
Yeah.
But in life in general, there are a million different ways. When I have a background in marketing, and people talk about marketing and marketing a business, and it's you see all the gurus out there who are like, this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one way.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's the way for everyone.
Totally. And I think that's such a great point, because I talk in every single one of my programs and to every single one of my clients about how the biggest thing that holds women back is this idea that there's the right way. And we grow up with this, and I think, women are socialized into it from, there's a right way to eat, there's a right way to look, there's a right way to dress, there's a right way to get out of the car. And then if you're an entrepreneur, or you go into, I'm a mom of 3 little kiddos, if you go into motherhood, if you go into entrepreneurship, there's definitely a right way to do that. And women are spending so much time with their notepad and pen being like, oh, that's the right way to serve breakfast to a 4-year-old child, and burn out very quickly, when in reality, there's a million different right ways.
Yes, because what book was it reading? I was reading, I think it was Dopamine Nation.
Yeah.
And she talks about, I don't know why. I mean, I know that there's 7 billion people in the world, or is it 8 now?
8. Yeah.
A lot. Okay. 8 billion people in the world, and 8 billion different views of reality.
Yeah.
Which also means that there are 8 billion different ways that you could be living your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting, because we're also in a really weird place in the world, I think, where you can see so many differences, right? I think that there's another book that is called, I haven't read it yet, but I've heard of it, called Weird. And it's it stands for white, English speaking, like IRD all stand for something. And it's basically the whole premise of the book is how we think that the place that we live, whatever we do, right? That everybody, I don't know, takes off their shoes in Canada when they walk into a house, or we all drive on this side of the street, right? You sort of just assume those are values and those are actions that are universal, and how wrong that is. And I think that in a world that's so multicultural and in a world that's so linked, I mean, I could be I had a call yesterday with someone in Australia, right? And you can speak to people across the world, and yet we still all think that there's one right way, and it's like the one that's in front of us.
Yes. I love that you brought that up, because that's true. And we need to well, I'm saying we need to. If you would like your life to be a little bit easier, calmer, more peaceful, accept that that there are different ways.
Yes.
And it would be interesting to explore, maybe the way I'm doing things is not getting me the results I'd like.
Yeah.
What if I did it differently? What if I did it the way she's doing it, or the way he's doing it? Or what if I adopted this way of thinking that's a little bit different than the way I think? Mm-hmm. And I know that's easier said than done.
Ask any of my clients. Any of my clients who hear that, they're like, I mean, that's like a lot of what I work with people on. And they're like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do it exactly how I've always done it.
Right. Because it's not working for me, but I'm going to keep doing it.
Totally.
Yeah. And you and I, before in our pre-show call, we just got on the topic of books, and we've already brought up a couple of them here. I love that. So I was just going to mention Joe Dispenza has a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Yeah.
Because we're so, I recommend it to people all the time, because that's the thing. It's like, well, how do I think differently? How do I do things differently? I don't know how to not be who I am, or how to not think the way I think. Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I would add to that is that so often we don't even know why we do the things that we do. Right. And that's something that I really work with all of my clients on, like right at the beginning, is just understanding why is it that you do the things that you do. Right. And sometimes the answers that your brain will offer to you as to why you do the things that you do aren't actually true. Right. So in my previous life as a pediatric dietitian, I would ask parents all the time, like, why are you making 12 different meals for dinner? And they'd be like, well, the reason is, like, the why is because my child has to eat, right? Like, it's a biological need that I need to meet. Mm-hmm. And the real reason was because I feel so insecure as a parent that if they eat, I just get to feel good about myself for 5 minutes. Like, I can pat myself on the back that at least I fed them, right? Yeah. That why.
I'm keeping them alive.
Exactly. And that why is very different than, well, of course my child has to eat. It's a biological need, right? But so we spend so long doing these things that we don't even always understand why we're doing or what we're getting from them. And we're like, I don't know, I've just always done it that way, so of course I have to.
Right. And allowing yourself time to stop and question what you're doing and why and what the result is. And is that the result you'd like to get, or would you prefer something different?
Yeah.
Nobody really makes a lot of time to do that.
Yeah.
If any time.
I think that time is always a tricky one, right? Because, so many busy professionals feel like they don't I'm running a workshop later this afternoon on why, working moms specifically feel like they have no time. Because that's the one that I hear a lot. And also I think that it's building the time and it's building the trust, right? Which I think are two different things, because when we don't build the trust to say, like, I'm willing to look at this and say, maybe there's another way, right? I'm willing to look at this and say, I'm going to try doing it this way today. And if it crashes and burns, it crashes and burns, right? If we can't trust ourselves enough to do that and sort of have our own back, time is a really great excuse as to why we never do it.
Oh, wow. That's good. Yes. That whole trusting yourself. Yeah.
And I think that it's really not a skill that so many women are raised with, right? Being able to have that trust.
Right. We're often taught to not trust ourselves, men and women, to not trust ourselves, to listen to those voices outside of ourselves because they know better than we do.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. And it's actually the opposite. We
It always
always,
is.
when you tap into your own inner voice and you allow yourself the time to hear it, or the space really, more than time, the space to hear it, that's your truth.
Yeah.
Not the truth of the other 8 billion people in the world.
Yes, definitely
So,
not.
since the show is called Fine is a 4-letter word, tell me about the time when you were struggling with that, when everything was fine but not fine.
First of all, I love the name of the show because it's so, it brings up like the Ross from Friends. Like, I'm fine. I don't know why it's all squeaky. And I think that it's something that I've definitely struggled with. And it's something that I think that, like, fine is also what women are taught is what we should aim for, right? Like, so long as you're fine, like, fine. We're not aiming for, like, good. We're not aiming for, like, I am living a life that I cannot even imagine. It's like, if you're fine, don't complain. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
that's kind of how I felt I found out that I was pregnant with my third child. Schools closed on Friday because of COVID. I found out that I was pregnant on Sunday. And was raising 3 little kids during the pandemic, was working on my pediatric nutrition practice, and I had spent so long in hustle of building it and being like, it has to get to a certain point and it should be here already. And, some people, like you said, like, have the one marketing secret and it gets them to 7 figures in 2 weeks. Why are I at 7 figures in 2 weeks? And there's something wrong with me, and all of those like mind games, comparing myself to everybody else. That I went back to work 6 days after having my son, brought him to every nutrition appointment, and very quickly found myself very burned out. And I was like, it's fine. It's just part of life, right? Raising 3 little kids and hustling to build a business. And this is what entrepreneurship is just like. And this is what being a young mother is like. So I must just be fine. It is just what it is. And very quickly I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm fine. I don't think I can remember my name really so much. And, really had to take a step back and acknowledging that, number one, I wasn't so fine, and number two, that fine wasn't really my goal in life, where I didn't want fine to be all that I was aiming for, were both very hard realizations to come to.
How did you come to them? Did somebody say something to you? Was there a specific incident that like hit you in the head by like a 2x4? What was it?
There were a couple of instances that like kind of hit me in the head by a 2x4. It was like when I got so used to like always being up and doing something. I remember there was like one Sunday morning, where we were like all sort of sitting around, and I was like, okay, we need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do that. And like everybody needs to do, I forget exactly what it was that I was saying. And my husband turned to me and he's like, we're all okay. Like just sitting here, like just hanging out, just watch, like, we're all good. Like, you're stressing that we're all, like, we want to go out and we need to do, and you need to make breakfast. And, like, all of, like, you're the only one who's stressed. And I was like, I am the only one who's stressed. Like, I was creating the story in my head of, like, my kids need me to make a 3-course meal for breakfast, or, like, make pancakes for breakfast, or I need to clean the house, or I need to throw in laundry and, like, get it all done before, like, 8 o'clock in the morning. And everybody else was okay. And I was the one who was like racing around like crazy. And it was just a lot of those, like, sort of realizing like all of these little stories, right? All of those little times. It wasn't like it was some massive, like the heavens parted and, God himself was like, hey, you're good down there. Like you can take a break. But it was really just noticing like a lot of hustle to nowhere. Right? Like a lot of just sort of like moving for the sake of moving and being like, why am I doing all of these things? Right? And having to really take that step back and like understand where I wanted to go and why I was doing all of these things that weren't really getting me there.
Yes, right. The idea of being in motion versus achieving something or accomplishing or taking right action. Whatever right action is in your particular, in that situation or whatever. and so many people spend their time because they're doing something. They feel like they're being productive, that they're accomplishing something, but really all they're doing is like walking in a circle.
Totally. Yeah. I say this all the time is, you know, like my clients, like if they value, they don't always recognize, but it is in the high achievers. You know, I work with perfectionist women. I work with women who want to be able to like do it all. They just don't, you know, they don't want people to be like, well, you can just relax and like go get a pedicure today and just like some self-care. They're like, no, I have an impact I want to have. Like want to show up in a certain way for my family. And they don't always realize that we're often socialized to hold being busy as a value. Right? To hold just being in motion. And the way that I often describe it is, you know, I'm a runner and I run inside during the winter because I just like I enjoy running. And so the treadmill is very useful for me if I just want to be in motion, right? If I want to be able to run and not risk falling outside. Right. But if I was trying to get somewhere, like actually get from point A to point B, I could run on the treadmill all day, every day. And with the Google Maps in front of me, I'm not going to get any closer to the place that I actually want to go. Right. And sometimes people equate just being in motion, just doing things as like, oh, I'm definitely moving myself further, you know, closer to my goal. And that's not always the case. Like sometimes you're just running on a treadmill just because you've been taught that just moving is what you should be doing.
That's such a great analogy.
I only think in analogies.
I love it. And right. And that allowing yourself, again, the space to stop and sit and recharge. I mean, maybe not physically sitting, but allowing yourself the space to recharge, because you're going to hear me say this on like every episode now, this whole idea of having a phone battery be at, you know, low battery mode when you go to bed, or maybe not even that late in the day. Maybe it's in the middle of the afternoon. It's on low battery mode. You throw it to the side and you don't plug it in. And you expect it to be back to 100% in a couple of hours or the next morning. And that's not how it works. And that's how
and you're pissed off at it that it's not back to
Right, exactly. That's right. It's the same thing with ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to recharge, and then we beat ourselves up for not being as productive as we think we should be. Yeah. But you didn't give yourself any time to recharge.
And then you just try and double your effort and then wonder why you're burning out faster, right? I think that's a lot of the burnout cycle that my clients end up in is like they're hyper productive, right? And then it still never feels like enough because number one, life is a never-ending to-do list. Like I could have a to-do list that I want to accomplish when I'm 90, and I'm like, oh, like why aren't I doing that today? And you know, so we never feel like it's enough. And then they're like, well, I must have just not have done enough, so I can't take a break. And then they're burnt out, and then they just feel like they have to push harder the next day. And so it's always sort of like this upping the ante and being mad at ourselves, like furious at ourselves that we can't seem to accomplish on that level.
Right. And on top of that, not being able to sleep because we haven't accomplished enough during the day. So now
I call them the credit rolls.
Recharge.
Yeah.
The what?
I call them the credit rolls. That like there's, you know how like before a movie and after a movie, there's like always the credits. The women that I work with tend to, like before we're working together, be falling asleep or waking up in the middle of the night or waking up in the morning with the credit rolls, right? Of like, take out the garbage, the report is due today, my kids' like soccer camp needs to be signed up for, all of those like credit rolls that never seem to stop for them.
Yes. That is, that's a great visualization. Yeah. So then what did you do after you came to the realization that you were in this fine place and not fine with being just fine? What was your next step?
It also happened to coincide with when my son started daycare. I think it was, you know, I dropped him off for his first day and I was like, oh, it's quiet and I don't have to do 12 things at the same time. And I was like, oh, I don't even remember my name anymore. And I really took a step back, which was probably the first time that I'd ever like taken a step back, like metaphorically taken a step back in my life, of not being like, I need to market my business and do. And I really just started from that day asking the question whenever I was doing something of why I was doing it. That was probably the first step that I took to stepping back from the burnout that I was experiencing, was getting super clear on why I was doing anything that I was doing. Whether it was, grocery shopping the way that I did, whether it was thinking about my business the way that I did, whether it was how I served my kids dinner, getting really honest with myself, like for the first time, not just accepting those, because sometimes our brains, and I say this to clients all the time, like will offer you, and it's like, why did you go out of the way and, pick your friend out from the airport at 3 a.m., even though it was 3 a.m. And your brain is like, because we are that good of a person. Like we are just the best people. And we like to think that that's why. And often there is some sort of external validation that we're looking for. Some sort of like, I was just moving. And if I was moving, I didn't have to listen to all of the thoughts that go on in my head about how like I should be further ahead and I should have done more and I should be, more accomplished in life, or I like how I messed up as a parent today when I sit down, right? Like if I move, I avoid all of those thoughts. A lot of the whys that we offer ourselves first just aren't true. And a lot of the honest ones aren't really fun. Like they, it's not the most fun experience to have to actually grapple with those honest answers. And so, I stepped back. I did a lot of research around behavior change, in addition to everything that I had from already being a dietitian, from how women are socialized, from how we end up here, and just started understanding that for myself so that I could really evaluate those whys. And then eventually I was like, oh, I think this is a thing that like other people need to hear, because all of my friends at the same time that I was saying this were also like every night we'd be sort of messaging like, are you struggling today? Like, cause I really had a hard day. Are you this? Like, I feel like I'm a crappy mom all the time. And I was like, oh, it's not, even though your brain offers you, like, it's only me and I'm clearly not, not measuring up and everyone else has it figured out. I was like, oh, nobody has these skills. Like we're an entire generation and probably generations before are being raised without these skills. Like they don't know what they're doing any more than I do. And so kind of just like emerged from my cocoon.
We think everybody else has it figured out. And and it's not true. And even the people in the highest, I'll say highest positions, whether that is in corporate or in any aspect of what you're comparing yourself to.
Yeah.
They don't have it figured out. No one has it figured out. We're all here to help each other along on this journey that's called life.
Totally. And I think that it's like, it's also when people are like, well, they have it figured out. I'm like, have what figured out? Like, what is the it? What do you think that they've figured out that you haven't? Because it might be this like one little tiny snippet. And also I think that we're so, especially as perfectionists, we're so conditioned to value the end goal, right? Mm-hmm. It's never the process. It's always like that end product.
Right.
And so we think that we're like, they've reached a certain point where now it's done. It's like wrapped up in a nice little bow. It's perfect for them. And nobody lives like that. Like even if, even like the Dalai Lama, like I'm sure they're still working on stuff, right? Working on self-development, trying to become more enlightened. Like I think that we sort of operate with this place of like, I'm a work in progress, but everybody else seems to be these beautiful packaged little people.
Right. Because our minds play tricks on us and tell us that. And again, it's not true. I love the exercise that you just mentioned about asking yourself around every task or every thought, why am I doing it this way?
Yeah.
That's a great exercise to engage in.
Yeah.
I'm going to challenge every one of you who is listening, do it for a day and then see if you could do it for a week.
My number one strategy, truthfully, to anybody who feels like they have no time is, I call it my what, why, what strategy, which is just, number one, we don't have to look back and like analyze our entire day, but just take like 5 minutes and think about what are the things you're doing in the day, because sometimes you don't even remember. Did you scroll Instagram for 30 minutes? Did you walk around the block? Did you cook dinner? Did you do work? Did you, whatever it is, like just write it down on a piece of paper and then go back and ask that question of why, right? Like, why did you cook dinner the way that you did? Why, when your kids were like, can we have cereal for dinner? And obviously I'm a picky eating, dietitian by training. So I there's a value to definitely, making certain things for dinner or whatever. But the point is, like, when your kids were asking for cereal, why did you feel the need to make a whole 3-course meal, right? Asking why. And then if you always going for 2 or 3, like challenge your brain to think of the second answer. So again, not that like I helped a friend because I'm just such a good person. Why'd you really do it? Right? If there were a more, and the way that I like to trigger this is if you ask the question why, and it is because I'm just such a good person, ask the question, if there were a truer answer, what would it be? Right? And then if you really can't think of anything, ask the second what, which is, what are you getting out of this? Because there's always something you're getting out of something, even if it's, I promised myself I was going to go to bed at 10 p.m. and I went to bed at 3 a.m. and now I'm exhausted. What were you getting out of that? I don't know. Maybe if you're a mom like me who has young kids, 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. is your only alone time. Maybe you were getting that. Maybe you forgot that report again because you've always held the example of yourself or the image of yourself as an irresponsible human. And this just confirmed it, right?
Right.
It doesn't have to be a positive thing that you're getting out of something. It can just be something that keeps you safe. And sometimes your brain would rather keep you safe in something that makes you feel horrible than introduce a new thought of like, because maybe I'm not totally irresponsible.
Yes, because that is familiar.
Exactly.
So it's comfortable because it's familiar, but that doesn't mean it's really comfortable.
Exactly.
I just wrote this down. this exercise. This is amazing. Yes. Yeah. So then once you started asking these questions of yourself, what were the answers you were getting and what did it lead you to create from that?
I didn't like the answers that I got, if I'm being honest, because, a lot of them were like, because this is the way that I'm supposed to, right? I'll give you one example that sounds like it's a really simple shift, but it was, very massive for me. Again, like, by training, I'm a dietitian. It was something as simple as like my kids were all in the same daycare that had a park attached to it. And even in the summer of that year, I started, packaging up like a snack, like dinner, like crackers and cheese and just, snacky things and bringing it to the park and like letting them just eat dinner there. And it was sort of like a just come and go and whatever kind of dinner. Like it wasn't, we all sit around the table and we all like have an organized dinner time, which is truthfully a way that I and a lot of dietitians will tell you like is a way to raise an intuitive eater. And I was like, but you know what? They're happy. I'm happy. Everybody's had a great time and we've all gone home, right? And so I realized how many times in my day, in my life, I wasn't taking those opportunities to just make things easier on myself, have everybody enjoy more, because I had such clear pictures of here's the right way to do things, right?
Yeah, you just said something that I want to draw out just to make a point about it.
Yeah.
It's okay for things to be easy.
Totally.
But we have this idea that if it's easy, it's not good.
And I think that we have to recognize, like, we come by that honestly. I say this, I ask my clients all the time, like, how can you make things 1% easier for yourself? Yes. But we don't value that as a society. Like, if you look at any Hollywood movie, right? When the basketball team who's been losing all season and lost the coach and they have no hope and they somehow make it to the finals, when they win, we cheer, right? When the underdog like comes back up like bloodied and battered, like we cheer for that person. But when the team who's been winning all season, probably because they've been working equally as hard and have been practicing, and so what? So they're good at basketball, like that's great. If they won, we'd be like, that's a stupid movie. Why did anyone make that? Like, we're not cheering for that team, right?
Right.
We have this idea of, like, we're only allowed to cheer for the David and Goliath story. And so, especially women internalize that. And they're like, how can I make doing laundry a David and Goliath story? right? Like, how can I make it like I overcame out obstacles to get to the other side, and not everything has to be that.
That it's only worth doing if it's difficult.
Absolutely.
Okay, go on with you. I just wanted to pull that point because I heard it loud and clear.
Yeah, and I think that's a really it's a really important point. I mean, like that was really, that was one of my whys, right? When I started asking, like, why am I doing things this way? Because, and sometimes the honest answer was because I'm trying to make it hard on myself, right? Because I only value things that are accomplishments if we've gotten to the other side, right? And so a lot of these whys were that, like, just recognizing I was doing things a lot of, like, there was definitely a right way to do it, and so I had to do it that way, especially if it was hard, because, like, we love a good overcoming story, and just starting to practice asking these questions. And I think that the mistake and the difference in how I now talk about things in the way that I talk about it with my clients versus how it's talked about in the industry is a lot of people are talking about burnout in how you got there, right? How you hustled and how you, like, burn yourself out. And so now, like, you're going to pull yourself back from burnout. And that's true. Like, I think that it's important that women everywhere know you don't need to wait until society changes or, like, again, like the heavens open or somebody is like, here is a 12-month long vacation that you can take and, like, see you in a year. You can pull yourself out, but you didn't get yourself here. Like, really being able to understand how women are socialized into burnout. Like, basically we're put in a car where, like, there's a rock on the gas pedal and then we get to burnout and people are like, I guess you got there by yourself.
Right. You did it to yourself.
You did it. Yeah.
Well, again, that's part of the beating ourselves up.
Yeah.
For, I don't know why. But
yeah, I think that women are, like,
we just covered a lot of the reasons why.
Yeah.
That we are so conditioned. It's a brainwashing.
Totally. That
happens for a lot of people, especially in North America. I mean, I know you're in Canada, and I usually say the U.S. is, like, masters at this. And one of my friends posted earlier this week on LinkedIn, she had just come back from 2 weeks in New Zealand and Australia. And she was writing a post about how insane our view of taking vacation or taking time off is. And how when she was over there and they were like, you brought your computer? Why?
Yeah, totally. It's so interesting. So I saw somebody, also a colleague posting about how she had gone on vacation and it was like a 3-day vacation with her husband. She's like, I left my kids and I went on vacation. And it was the first time that I've ever left my work computer. She's like, I consciously had to choose. And it is, like, it's revolutionary. Don't bring your computer along, right? And I think that we all, I was joking to somebody else earlier in the week that there's nothing, even doing this work, there's nothing that, like, irks me more than when I get a reply to an email, like, 3 days later, and it says, sent from my iPhone. And I'm like, you've had this on your computer, on your iPhone the entire time, and, like, it took you 3 days to respond. Okay, right? But it is, like, it's funny. Like, I notice that conditioning even in myself. Like, if the email got there 3 days ago, of course they should answer it 3 days ago. Doesn't matter if it was 1 a.m. Like, they should be answering it when they get the email, right? And that's how so many of us operate and how so many of us end up burning out because. No, like, you don't have to do everything immediately now all the time. You don't have to be on all the time, but we all think that we do.
Right. And it comes back to that we teach people how to treat us. So we teach them if we are going to be available 24/7, we're teaching them to then expect to get a response right away. Whereas you could equally as easily train them or teach them that I will get back to you within 24 hours or 48 hours or, only between the hours of 10 and 4 on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Like, whatever you want it to be.
And I think that, what I say is that there was the analogy that somebody, like, a couple of years ago had talked about between, like, recognizing what are plastic balls that you're juggling and glass balls. Like, when you're trying to juggle multiple things, having to know what are glass balls and what are plastic balls, like what's going to drop and break. And, you know, I talk about like glass balls and plastic balls, and there are lots of balls that we should have never been juggling to begin with, right? Like we should have just never picked up. But the reality is we're not even seeing the balls that we're juggling as plastic or glass. We're like, this is an atomic bomb. And if I drop it, like all hell is going to break loose. And most of the time, we're not creating the space to like not answer that email, because we're like, if I don't answer that email, the world as we know it is going to end. And 99.9% of the time, that's just not true, right? But it's how we think about it. And so we unconsciously like expect other people to also.
Yeah. Wow. This has been such a good conversation. We have so many amazing analogies that are stuck in my head now.
That's why I use them, because they can't get out.
Right. With great lessons attached to them. And this exercise of questioning what, why, and what are you getting out of it.
Yeah.
Love it. Before we go, let me ask you, what is the song that you listen to when you need an extra boost of energy?
Okay. So I have a couple of them.
Okay.
But my favorite one to listen to now is actually, because I showed my kids the movie recently, Mulan. There's a song in Mulan, the Make a Man Out of You, that I is always a fun hype song for me.
Okay, cool. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. The other thing I'd like to put in the show notes is how somebody can get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. So the two places that I hang out most are on Instagram. My handle is Ahuva Hershkop. And I run a free community on Facebook called Beyond Burnout with Ahuva Hershkop. And there you can find out more about my 12-week coaching program, any of the shorter containers that I run, and just come hang out with like-minded women who are moving beyond burnout.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story on Fine is a 4-letter word.
Thank you for having me.